Tracy had pleaded with her husband, Mark, not to stop the car. They were driving through the heart of a dense, sprawling forest in the middle of the night. It was supposed to be a celebratory road trip. They were heading to Mark's parents' estate to surprise them for their 50th wedding anniversary. On a whim the previous night, they had decided to take a scenic, secluded back road to keep the surprise intact. Suddenly, their headlights caught the figure of an old man standing by the edge of the road. Tracy felt a cold shiver of dread at the thought of stopping for a stranger in such a desolate place. But Mark wouldn't listen. He was convinced the man was in trouble. Mark argued that the man looked far too frail to be any threat. As they slowed down, Tracy noticed the man leaning heavily on a wooden cane, his body trembling violently as if staying upright required every ounce of his strength. Ignoring Tracy's protests, Mark pulled the car over. The old man looked utterly helpless in the wilderness, but as they drew closer, Tracy noticed something unsettling. His eyes had a peculiar predatory glint, a gaze that felt hungry and wrong. She tried to warn Mark again, but it was too late. He had already rolled down the window. Mark asked if he needed help. The man claimed he had lost his way in the woods and just wanted to go home, saying his house was somewhere nearby. Tracy found his story hollow. When Mark asked how he ended up lost, the man offered no logical explanation, dodging questions with vague one-word answers. He claimed he couldn't remember anything and begged them to just take him home. It was 3 a.m. Tracy was fuming. Why would any family let an elderly man out alone on a freezing night? What was he doing in the forest at this hour? He seemed mentally unstable, and his evasive behavior screamed danger. Tracy felt certain he was hiding something. Nevertheless, Mark insisted on helping. The man climbed into the back seat and they drove toward his directions. Tracy tried to strike up a conversation to vet him, but he remained chillingly silent, acting as though he didn't understand her. He just kept staring at them with that same haunting gaze. The silence inside the car was suffocating. After a while, the man abruptly told Mark to stop. They had arrived at a massive Victorian-style house looming in the shadows. The property was eerily quiet, dark, and biting cold. They soon realized the old man lived there entirely alone. When Tracy asked about his family, the man's voice turned hollow. He claimed he had lost his entire family in a tragic car accident and kept the house as a memorial to them. He whispered that he felt like they were still there with him. Tracy's mind raced. How could an old man live here alone with no neighbors, no stores, and no means of transportation for miles? The more he spoke, the more Tracy sensed a web of lies. She watched in horror as Mark seemed to fall under a sort of spell, nodding along to every word as if he were being mesmerized. As they prepared to leave, the man invited them to stay the night, citing the treacherous forest roads. They declined, explaining they had to reach Mark's parents by dawn. The man then insisted they at least stay for a cup of tea. Feeling a momentary lapse of pity for his loneliness and shivering from the cold, they agreed. They drank the tea quickly, hoping to get back on the road immediately after. But when they reached the car, they found all 4 tires were slashed. It was impossible. The car had been fine moments ago. How could all 4 go flat at once? As they looked around, Tracy noticed something terrifying. The ground around the house was littered with what looked like countless fingernails, mostly buried under the thin layer of snow. Tracy realized it was a trap. She had tried to warn Mark, but he had dismissed her fears, certain that a frail old man couldn't possibly hurt them. Now, stranded without a cell signal and miles from help, They had no choice. They had to go back inside and wait for daybreak. The old man seemed delighted to see them return. It was as if he had expected them. He ushered them to separate guest rooms. Exhausted and trying to numb her mounting panic, Tracy eventually fell into a heavy, uneasy sleep. A strange sound woke her, a wet, tearing noise coming from outside her door. She reached out, but Mark's side of the bed was cold and empty. He wasn't in the bathroom either. Heart pounding, she crept out of the room. The sound was louder now, coming from the basement. Tracy descended the creaky wooden stairs, and the sight that met her eyes was a living nightmare. Mark was lying on the cold stone floor. His body was shriveled, his skin a ghastly, bloodless yellow. He was dead. The floor was slick with blood. A young man was hunched over him, draining the last of the blood and tearing at the flesh. As the figure turned, Tracy gasped. It was the old man, but transformed. He looked decades younger, vibrant and strong. Tracy realized then that he wasn't human. He was a creature of the night, a vampire who stayed young by consuming the lifeblood of others. He lured travelers to his remote lair to feed his eternal hunger. Tracy let out a piercing scream. The creature turned its predatory gaze toward her. She was next. She turned and bolted for the door. As she ran, the creature's long, razor-sharp claws raked across her back, drawing blood. She managed to break free and burst out into the freezing night. Running through the snow was grueling. Her back was burning with pain, and her legs were becoming numb from the sub-zero temperatures. She finally reached the main road, but just as hope flickered, she collided with something hard and collapsed into unconsciousness. Tracy woke up 17 days later in a hospital bed. A passing motorist had hit her and, seeing her condition, rushed her to the ER. The doctors told her she had lost a massive amount of blood and had deep, jagged lacerations on her back. They assumed she had been attacked by a mountain lion or a bear. Tracy told them nothing. She knew the truth was too insane for anyone to believe. She survived by a miracle, but her spirit was shattered. The guilt of that night haunts her every waking moment. If only Mark had listened. If only they hadn't stopped. Today, Tracy lives in the shadow of that road trip. The night her life stopped, even though her heart kept beating.